Welcome to the EX Factor, where we discuss the practical application of building an employee experience as your competitive advantage. I'm Mark Lewis, CEO of Crewmojo, a platform for automating and managing a more personalised and meaningful employee experience. Hi, Aleece. Welcome to the X Factor podcast. Thank you very much for joining us on this session. Please maybe start by giving us a little introduction about yourself and the organisation that you work with.
Yeah, sure. Thank you for having me, by the way. I'm very excited to talk about employee experience. So I have luckily been a part of the M&C Saatchi group for 5.5 years now. And in my current role as the HR operations partner, I'm essentially looking at how we translate the people strategy into action. Bring efficiency, innovation, and continuous improvement to the business operations. But at the heart of it mainly is like, what does that experience look like for our employees throughout the entire career with M&C Saatchi Group? So the group itself is actually a collection of 9 agencies, all with a unique capability. So from design and experience to media and sponsorship, and obviously advertising, which is our bread and butter. But we share a collective ambition. So whether it's taking clients' brand or business above and beyond, or whether it's people's careers pushing to the limits, we welcome lots of fearless and unthinkable goals and encourage people to achieve them. So we do this by organising original thinkers in uncommon ways, which is our ambition. And we bring together like-minded people to push through creativity, just to think differently, work together, but put their own spin and approach on things. So we're made up of 400 people across Sydney, Melbourne and Auckland. Like I said, they're all diverse. They all have a mix of skill set, background, perspectives, and that really helps put our vision to reality.
Awesome. And the thing that I really took there as well is there's 9 different units that have come together. And how does that, what challenges does that present in terms of getting alignment of cultures when you've got 9 different entities that have all come together?
Key question, and we've only got 45 minutes, so I'm not sure we can cover that one all in one, but yeah, there's definitely a lot of challenges. They do have a bespoke culture in all of them, and we definitely embrace that. I think structurally we are all under one roof pretty much. For Sydney, there's a majority of us here, and then there's Melbourne and Auckland, but majority of us are based in Sydney, and it really helps to bring that culture alive and have that overarching values that kind of guide us to that. But we definitely embrace the individuality of every group company, because they are bespoke, they do have their own little niches, they do have their ways of working, but we do try and align it to an overarching structure.
That's awesome. So you're not trying to drum it out of people, you're letting people have their individuality, but while sharing the similar sort of values across the whole entity.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's
Yeah.
awesome. Maybe tell me a little bit about the purpose of performance at M&C Saatchi and what the outcomes are that you're seeking from having this process.
Yeah. Well, there's 3 kind of different areas. So we've got individual performance, and then you've got your overarching group performance. And because of how we're structured, we've also got that individual group company performance. So there's 3 different ways that we're kind of viewing it. And the goal from an individual level, which all ladders up, is to help employees build on their skills, and obviously to enable them to perform better, to reach their potential, whether it's with us or outside of us, but at the same time accomplishing those strategic goals of the company. So, it always, to be able to do that, you have to align it to the ambition, so which I talked about before. So we know that it starts with how we show up as individuals every day. And the way that we've aligned that is through our values. It's the heart of everything we do. We actually got our employees to write the values, so they actually bought in to the purpose. They're aligning it. They've chosen this to represent, and that's embedded through when they start their probation reviews, their performance reviews, their team meetings, our annual group assemblies that we have. So it's brought up all throughout their entire life cycle.
That's fantastic. So tell me a little bit more, like I've heard of getting buy-in and so on from employees to help with values. Tell me a bit about that process that you went through. I'm really curious to understand what that looked like when you say employees wrote the values. Step me through how that looked.
Yeah, well, luckily we're a creative agency, so there's a lot of good ideas coming out. But yeah, we put it to the people, and it was actually not born from P&C, People and Culture team. It was actually born from the leadership team, which is where you want, your values to come from and embed throughout, so the top down. And they sought key people across the group to help get together, workshop different ways to think about what are the values and what are the behaviors that are mean to them. So ours are a little bit different. We have, like as an example, we have roll as one, but it doesn't necessarily mean as, yes, it means come together and doing things together to achieve that ultimate goal, but it could also mean something fun, like, literally rolling as one person down a hill. Like, we're trying to add a different spin on how we approach value, to add the fun to it.
That's awesome. And from often we hear there's performance processes at the sort of operational level. How do you ensure that is connecting through to performance to support the overall organization strategy?
Yeah. Well, look, never underestimate the power of values when it comes to performance, because the way that we look at it and how we teach it through training and education is that it's the guiding light to the North Star, essentially. So it's the thing that's going to align you. So from an operational perspective, we have it in our 360s. We have it in when you do your self-review, so you can assign how you think you're showing up as this value. And we also have it from a manager point of view and how they kind of see that employee showing up in the business. With our strategy, it's reviewed and I guess it's pretty much developed on a annual basis. So even though it's looked at annually, it still remains agile because of all of the elements that kind of influence the strategy, like client needs, market challenges, things like that. But the thing that brings us back is people are our biggest asset. So they're responsible for bringing on clients, maintaining relationships, and obviously the creative output. So we need to lean on their talents and their skill sets and what they provide, so we can match in how we develop. So we look at that and then we align, okay, where do we need to pivot? Where do we need to change? We need to are our employees staying on the cutting edge of their marketability? Do we need to invest more in the training? Do we need to, be excellent to each other, which is another value, and cross-charge how we're doing the skills that we have? Do we have some people in one part of the business that can train other people in the business? So we just kind of look at ways to optimize the best that we can and flex our strategy when we need.
So it sounds like you're really using the process to try to build the capability of your people, which in turn leads to better outcomes from a customer perspective and from an organization execution or strategy execution perspective too.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there is also operationally from a very fundamental level, we have consistent job descriptions, which also have the values aligned to it. We have added a platform for review cycles, and we've created a fair process of 360 feedback that gives a real holistic view of someone's performance, which also really supports how they show up.
It's awesome, and we'll definitely dive into the 360 in a little bit for sure. Maybe when HR leaders are thinking about designing a performance experience, often they're underpinned by some principles. So did you have any principles that guided the design of the performance process that you have there?
Yeah, we did. I mean, we ultimately, in our roles within people and culture, we're ultimately responding to what the workforce needs or what they've asked for in the feedback. So for us, when we were going through it, we crafted an experience that's designed to encourage consistent feedback and clear goals, as well as tangible deliverables and a commitment to development across every level of the business. That's what we've heard. We want training, we want education in these areas. So, and what we realized by doing this is that it actually starts from day one. So we looked at performance throughout an entire life cycle, not just the annual review time. And we created something called Your Pathway. and it looks at the first 12 months of an employee journey, where obviously the first three months is all about learning and contributing and understanding what your roles and responsibilities are, and then 90 days is all about that independence and ownership of that. How you're going to take what you've learned and apply it to your day-to-day. Then you move into your probation review, which is the first formal experience of a 360 feedback. Then you have reflection, how did you go? And then planning for the future. So that's your first experience with a personal development plan. And then we move to 12 months, where we look at a stay interview. So we capture feedback of what works, what doesn't work, how we can set them up in the right career track, and how we can look from a manager perspective or even from a HR perspective is what key goals or what key talent do they already have existing, where are they tipping, and how can we utilize that across the board. So that was our biggest finding when building this out. And then with the annual review time, we actually moved to an employee-led program. So this happens annually. And the intention here was to empower people to take career development into their own hands. They're responsible for driving the frequency of their deliverables in line with obviously the business objectives, and be accountable to themselves. But then from a manager perspective, we looked at taking the admin side of the process and making it really simple, so that it allows them more time to spend having those rich conversations around expectations, around where they see themselves in 12 months, those stuff that really actually inspires people, not so much the admin side.
That's so the bit that really grabs me there as well is the level of autonomy and having people taking ownership. Is there challenges that you've faced, or is there ways that you could share of how to build that accountability so that people are getting involved in the process and they are actually taking ownership? Is there anything that you've learned from that process that others might benefit from, that are trying to create a more employee-owned approach?
Yeah, I mean, the use of tech is number one for us, because you can actually hold them accountable, because it's all there, it's all right in front of you. You can see it, you can view where they're at and where they're kind of held up in that. That's more from a HR kind of management side. The engagement's there, it's just how do we keep that engagement being consistent. And so what we're looking at is kind of little challenges. We have our internal intranet, where we'll post different things of statuses of completion rates, or
Nice.
we'll bring, things like that, or we'll bring to individual group company meetings, like, hey, this is how, this agency is performing, where's the hold up? And sometimes if it's really out of control, the HRBP will actually join the meetings and go, okay, where are you having issues? Where are you stuck? And usually it comes down to education. It comes down to, I forgot what I had to do. I don't know how to do this. Am I responsible for doing this? So we've also done like a quick guide that lives on our intranet. But we also make ourselves available to sit down and actually have that human experience and go through it one-on-one with people. I think that's actually the key, rather than sending someone just a how-to guide here and there. Sometimes it's efficient, but people want that human experience. They want to sit down and go through it with you.
People are doing these sort of HR related skills, if you like, on an infrequent basis. So to have someone come and sit alongside and give them a bit of a boost in confidence for doing those activities can really just lift or remove that barrier that might be stopping them from progressing. So yeah, that's
Absolutely.
awesome.
And the platform will, how we designed the experience for annual reviews anyway, is it's designed so regardless of where you're at in your manager journey, if you're a brand new manager or if you've been a manager for 10 years, you still have the same level of at your fingertips. Like, you can still access the same training. We're still there to support regardless of where you're at. And the goal is be consistent with your feedback. Be
Yeah.
consistent and clear with your KPIs and your goals that you're setting, and making sure that there is just alignment within your own team. And you could be a manager for 6 months or 2 years to have that same goal.
Yeah, actually, from an insider perspective, I really like how you guys integrated some of those training links and things as part of your process so that they're literally at the fingertips in the moment that they're actually going through the process. That's quite a nice touch too.
Yeah.
Tell me, how do you want people to feel? Like, how do you want employees to feel about the performance experience that you guys have created?
It's funny because when I was looking at this previously, the first thing that came to my mind was that the reality is we just want them to know that we give a shit. Like,
Yeah,
hands down,
yeah,
like that's it. We care. The
yeah.
business cares. And career development is important, and the best person to drive growth is you. So, from a people perspective or a HR perspective, we strive to ensure that our people feel empowered, and we strive to ensure that our managers feel educated enough and supported enough to empower their team to
Hmm.
move through that. So that's it. It's not
That's great.
complicated.
Well, that's the good thing. Again, I've seen a lot of patterns now that simplicity is where these things
Yes,
win. Overcomplicating it makes
it
it a
is.
challenge to digest, and having that underlying message of we care about you, your growth, your development is extremely empowering.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Yeah.
What and the other thing which I remember right at the beginning is you had spreadsheets and Word docs and I think or Google Docs and Google Forms that you were pulling together before you moved on to the Crewmojo platform. How did that sort of migration come about? What did you learn from undertaking the process manually, if you like, before going on to a digital experience? Could you share a little bit about that journey?
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like I've got PTSD from that whole experience because it's definitely not efficient. And someone who's in operations, it's just like a mess to kind of see. But it was always supposed to be an interim solution. So we were working off Google Docs since I started 5.5 years ago. So the intention was to have something that's not paper, but that provided the right information to the right people and the confidentiality. And the way that we're structured as a business, there's a lot of input across the different businesses, so the access to different managers was needed as well. So that was supposed to be an interim solution. It turned into 5.5 years of our actual tool, and as you can imagine, it was a whole level of frustration, not only from us from a HR perspective, but managers not having consistent reviews from people, employees not having an understanding of where they're at in their PDP or how
Mm,
they're tracking. So when this option to get a system is obviously was something that was born out of the feedback that we were hearing from everyone nonstop, all the way from the CEO, all the way down to the concierge. Everybody wanted a new system, so it was very easy to get that buy-in straight away because we knew we needed to change immediately. But it had to be simple. We are a little bit complicated in our structure in the way that we're set up, but we still needed to have a simple system and also not to take away from those rich conversations that were happening, but also something that we could hold people accountable to. So we're very, very grateful for Crewmojo because it's ticked all of our boxes. And we've actually got it in a really good place. There's still more to come in phase 2 and 3 rollouts, which I'm excited about, but the overwhelming positive feedback has been awesome.
I think
Yeah.
what you've just said there as well is there's a really good insight for others, and that is where you said phase one, two, and three. I think what you did starting very simple, a simple migration to from one platform to another, but keeping the same process. We didn't disturb your current way of doing things that you had learnt had worked well. For example, well, like you said there, the keeping it conversationally rich rather than turning it into a form filling exercise.
Yeah.
You kept all of that as the heart of the process, and now you've got this platform where people have come onto it. You're in a position to then iterate again, phase 2, phase 3, with these other improvements without overwhelming people with a huge big change in one go. So I think that's a nice insight for others to look at too.
Yeah. And I think
Yeah.
the other thing that I would add on to that is that we actually even though we did keep the same process, we did evolve it where it needed to be evolved. And where we did that is we actually got manager champions across the group to help us design the flow and to design how it looks physically in the system. So we tried different things. We did different scenario plans on how different things would roll out, and we had managers across the board contribute to that and ask them what they wanted, what they didn't want, what was useful, what do they need that we don't already have. So there was some slight adjustments, but it's all aligned to what they need.
It's brilliant. I really, again, see that as an often success factor of getting adoption is prior to going live or during the process of really just getting input from key people on the ground that are going to be using it, and letting them feel heard and taking their feedback on board can make all the difference between a successful rollout versus something that just doesn't land. So again, a great project insight there as well. Maybe from there, describe the overall performance cycle that you have and the key sort of milestones or activities throughout that period.
Sure. So we did do something a little different this year. So we used to operate on a biannual review. So it was annual for everyone, but we split it into two parts of the year. So we actually moved to one cycle. And we also aligned to, we educated people, and we were being a bit more transparent with people around when and why we're conducting these reviews at this time. So we've moved to May to July. So it's a big period to to get it done, but that's taking into account, managers who have up to 10 people reporting into them and giving them that time to be actually invest and take the time to complete it. So we've made it quite large. That's the max time. You can do it anytime before then. And then we've implemented a pulse check within December, January. So just a little halfway check-in point to see how you're tracking. And what that includes is we do a 360 feedback request. That's both internally and externally. So internally is anyone who's a part of the M&C Saatchi group, Australia, New Zealand. And externally could be clients, it could be suppliers, it could be people in our global network that we've worked with, any way you think you can collect some feedback from. And then we also have the self-review. So the employee will complete that. And then there's a time where a manager will review everything, complete their summary, and spend a dedicated time going through what those review feedback looks like with the employee. So it's really a time purely dedicated to how they're tracking, not necessarily where they want to go, how they're tracking, where they want to kind of focus their time, and then the employee will go away and complete their PDP.
Gotcha. So does the feedback request that goes out, is that initiated by the team member? Is it initiated by the manager? Who does it come back to? Tell me a little bit about the 360.
It's initiated by the employee. So
Awesome.
being this employee-led platform, we've asked employees to nominate who they would like to collect feedback from. The manager will have final say, they'll get to review it, but mostly the employees are pretty good at getting that well-rounded view of who they're asking for, and we ask up for about 20 people that you can request from. So it's pretty big scope that you can ask, and so the employee kicks it off, and then the manager has a few steps, but then the employee is in charge of their self-review and getting a kickstart of their PDP, and then the manager's there to support and encourage and kind of guide in the right direction, add that element to the strategic goals where needed, but ultimately just to be there as a support.
I think you mentioned earlier there's more focus on the conversation. So once that sort of the administration has been completed of gathering in the feedback, how does that then work from a meeting perspective? Is that a one-on-one time? Tell me a little bit about that process.
Yeah, so when it's all come through, it's all confidential. So none of the 360 feedback is shared, but the role of the manager is to review it all and to summarize it with their own feedback we have a form that's built out into 3 sections. So what are they doing really well? Where are some areas that they can improve? And how do they align to the values? And so it's more of a snapshot. And one thing that we educate with the managers is that if there's anything in there that you disagree with, seek to understand, or you don't have to put it in. Ask more questions, see what you like, or if it's something that you completely disagree, you don't have to add it in. And so they'll take that into the one-on-one in-person meeting. So again, not removing that, not using the system's there as a support, but have that meeting, talk about here in person where you think the employee is doing really, really well, and then give the feedback.
Fantastic. And why were these elements a particular priority for M&C Saatchi?
Well, I think the first one is more from a strategic side of things. We've really wanted to align to how we do our business planning. So our business planning happens at a certain point of the year, as well as our budgets that we do for the following year. So we really wanted to have more alignment. So we were taking more of a proactive approach instead of reacting. So by then we actually know who are our top performers, who are our ones that are on the cusp, and who need a little bit more help. So we then can strategically plan what our training budget looks like, what our provisions for increases will look like, where we need to spend most of our time, which then will help build out what the next strategy is going to be. So it's all kind of strategically done. It doesn't always go that nicely and that smoothly on paper, but that's the intention of it. And then the second piece is around that core and growth goals. So when we do our PVP, we separate our goals into core, which is basically the core responsibilities of your job. So anything tangible associated with the strategic business output would go into that. And then core is growth is those ones that are going to help you get to that, either that next level or the next phase. And that is really important because that's how we differentiate where our performance and our potential of people sit.
A couple of things that I really take out from there as well is you've really contextualized where performance sits in the bigger picture. So it's not something that's just been looked at in a silo. It's really, and two things that strike me. One is the allowing managers and the review process to take like a couple of months rather than trying to jam it into 2 weeks. It's recognizing, hey, we've got managers that are responsible for quite a few direct reports. Let's make this process fit the way that they work so that they're not slammed out of action for an entire week or two. They can spread it out over a longer period of time. And secondly, then looking at how the overall process then fits, so you can take those outcomes and slot that into your strategic planning process. It's really again smart the way it's been contextualized for your unique environment rather than just trying to do a run-of-the-mill approach.
Yeah, surprisingly, like when we were looking at this, feedback obviously happens all the time, and it's something that's key for managers, employees, anyone, clients, anything. But it's always that taboo topic. It's always something that people either struggle with or over-index in or need more support in. So our approach is building it from day one, so in that pathway. And I think that's going to be the game changer in how we do performance, because it's over their entire life cycle, not just a moment in time.
So it becomes something that's just a normal way of working effectively. Yeah,
that's right.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So cool. Is there anything that you wanted to express more about in terms of any of those elements? Is there anything that you would want to walk us through that's particularly interesting, or do you feel like you've covered the elements in sufficient detail?
Yeah, I think this is still new for us this way. We've just rolled it out this year. So I'd love to talk to you next year and see how it works and how we're going.
Part two.
But part two, stay tuned. But yeah, I think where we're at right now and in how we're developing, it's developed for the right reasons. And I think that because we are responding to what people have asked for and what they need, I think we're going to have a higher engagement on this. Now we just need it to do its time.
So reversing back to before implementation, and when you've got the uncertainty of how it's going to unfold, what was the rollout strategy?
Well, I think we had an upper hand because our previous way of working was so horrendous that I think everyone was just so on board for something new. So the rollout was actually pretty easy to get the buy-in from our exco. And then once we had developed obviously what it looked like, having those manager champions were absolutely key for us. They really did help hit all of those key points, got us to think a little bit differently as well, because we're looking at it from a people lens as well as an employee lens as well as a manager lens. So it was really good to have diversity in how we're approaching it. And then we did a lot of education and training. So on our live date, we set up a whole day of drop-in sessions, in person, virtual, anywhere at all points of the day, to come in, learn the platform. And even now we still do specific trainings outside of that. So trainings around how to have meaningful conversations, how to create clear goals and KPIs. So the other side of things to kind of really enhance outside of the operational.
Absolutely. And I think it's as much pain as it sounds like there was with a manual system. It sounds like it actually gave you a lot to learn from, and for people to understand what they do and what they don't like, to take those learnings forward, to give you a good clarity over what you want to see from the digital experience. And then layering on top of that this training and being available and listening to what people are saying has really all come together to create like a smooth rollout, and keeping ears open to potential improvements that can be made down the track as well.
Oh, absolutely. Like there's always room for improvement. And even now we've had feedback and we'll continue. We're encouraging it, right? We always encourage the feedback for it. But I think we'll see more when we do our phase 2, which is building out the whole pathway through there. And phase 3, which is the implementation of all the historical data in there so everyone can have an overview. And then we've got more plans for next year.
Were there any challenges that you hit at any point in the process that you would call out as a good learning from there, or something that others to might do differently if they were going on a similar path?
Yeah, I think the challenges were more around trying to please everybody. Because we're made up of 9 different agencies, everybody thinks so differently, and is a balance around what managers need, what the business will provide, and actually what we need from a compliance perspective. So it was mapping that all out, but also not trying to make it too heavy admin focused, simple as best. And that took a couple of tries, to be honest. That took a lot of back and forth around, okay, what do we do this? What do we do that? And I wouldn't say it was a negative challenge. It was just, you think differently. It was a challenge to put yourself in, okay, if I'm this person or if I'm this type of person, how am I going to, what's my experience going to look like? And making sure that we tick all of those boxes.
Yeah, I think it's a critical thing, and it seems to be a theme that you've repeated a few times there, is stepping into the shoes of the different lenses as you described earlier. And even to say, hey, we've got this process, sounds great, but what happens if we're a manager with 10 reports and it's having to be done 10 times over?
That's right.
You've really taken that employee or user-centric approach to understand their individual experiences in that same process. And I think that's, again, a bit of a winning formula there to make sure that you're not creating a monster that's not palatable for people to get on with. Yeah.
Yeah, take your most challenging scenario, and if you can find a solution for that, you can find a solution for anything.
Yeah, absolutely. Was there anything unexpected that surprised you throughout the process?
Actually, how much everybody loved it. And I mean that in the best way possible. I think it's because, with anything that you roll out, especially when you put your heart and soul into it and you're really trying to get that engagement, you expect there to be pushback in some parts of the business or some areas that you really have to hone in. But consistently across the board, we haven't had that. And I'm kind of waiting for it to drop so we can learn from it from a people perspective and build on it. But maybe that's still to come. But I'm actually quite surprised that, it's been adopted by quite a lot of people. Now we just have to be consistent.
What do you think the reason is that people loved it so much? Because I do hear stories as well of where you can have this put your heart and soul into a project launch, and then you get a lot of pushback. What do you
Yeah.
think might have been different there? Why did they love it?
I think, well, some of the feedback that I've heard to date is around being a one-stop shop for everything. They don't have to go here, here, and here to get all that feedback, or to do their review or to schedule a meeting. It's everything is in there. It's super simple. It's like we've taken all their pain points away and given them what's left, and it's so easy to do. So I think that's been a driver. Also, outside of the platform, we're heavily talking about career development, and we do that from the recruitment stage all the way through. So people are like energetic, and people are really interested to get in there and to use it and see what that looks like, and put your little emojis onto your PDP and see how you're tracking. It's exciting, it's fun. So I think that's a key point. Make it fun.
So true. It's kind of trying to remove it from the perspective of a compliance oriented process that's being done to them, to everything that you've said is really about actually aligning with what's going to be motivating for employees, helping them to have their own decisions in the process, helping them to define the process, helping them to pick the goals that they're going to work towards, and ultimately supporting them in getting there. So why wouldn't they like that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Where to from here? Is there, how do you ensure that the process stays relevant to your people, and the strategy that obviously will evolve as well?
So, where to from here is definitely the implementation of the full pathway. So, the full end to end of the 12-month journey will be living in Crewmojo. We're also getting new people in our team, so I'm sure their lens on how they do performance reviews will really add that next layer into us evolving it.
That's awesome. Really appreciate your time and insights. Now, if people wanted to contact you on LinkedIn, is that the best place to say hi and that they heard you on the podcast?
Yes, LinkedIn is perfect. I'm trying to get more active on there, so please pull me to LinkedIn. Yes.
Please do. So do a
Yes.
search for Aleece and say, hey, heard you on the podcast. Let's
Yeah.
connect and share inspiration.
Yes,
That's awesome.
absolutely. Reach out for anything. I'm happy to chat through. I love talking about different ways of doing things. So even if you've heard this and you've got some suggestions for me, please flick it over. I'm open to it.
Fantastic. Good one, Aleece. Thank you so much for your time and joining us on the podcast. And we look forward to speaking soon and helping along further with the journey of M&C Saatchi and performance.
Great. Thanks for having me.